I am 32 years old, and for the past 10 years, I have been raising my sister's children the way you raise something you love, completely, while slowly understanding that love without limits is not generosity, but erosion, and that the person being eroded is always the one who never learned to say the word no. When my mother died, I was 22 years old and 3 months out of nursing school, and my sister Dana was 25 with a 2-year-old named Cooper, and a life that had always required more scaffolding than she was willing to build herself. My father had retreated into whatever private world grief and alcohol construct together, and Dana showed up at my apartment in Cincinnati on a Wednesday evening with Cooper on her hip and her eyes already doing the thing they did when she had already decided what she needed and was working backward toward the asking. "Just help me get through the next few months," she said, standing in my doorway, "just until I find my footing." That was 10 years ago. Cooper is 12 now. His sisters Jade and Brooklyn are 9 and 7, and the twins, Liam and Leah, are 5. And I have attended every school play and doctor appointment and fevered 3 in the morning and packed every lunch and braided every piece of hair and helped with every homework assignment for a decade while working 12-hour shifts as a pediatric nurse at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and Dana's version of finding her footing turned out to require a foundation I was expected to provide indefinitely without being asked whether I was available to build one. The pattern assembled itself so gradually that I missed it happening the way you miss the moment a season changes, noticing only afterward that something fundamental has shifted and you cannot identify the exact day it went. First, it was watching Cooper while Dana worked. Then it was school pickup because she had late shifts. Then doctor visits because I understood the medical side better. Then signing permission slips because I was always the one who remembered. Then buying school clothes because someone had to. Then staying up through fevers and nightmares because I was there and she was not. And being there had become my primary identity in this family, whether I had chosen it or not. My alarm went off at 5:30 every morning, and I would find Cooper and Jade arguing over the last granola bar while one of the twins had spilled something on the kitchen counter and the other was crying about a shoe that could not be located, and I would split the granola bar and clean the counter and find the shoe and braid Brooklyn's hair and pour coffee I never had time to finish hot and get everyone into my Honda Pilot and run the triangle of 3 different schools before driving to the hospital where I cared for other people's sick children for 12 hours and then came home to do it all again. My nursing school classmates were advancing. My friend Priya had become a nurse practitioner. Simone had her MSN and was working in pediatric oncology at Cleveland Clinic. Danielle was teaching at the university now. I was still on the same floor at Cincinnati Children's, missing continuing education conferences because of school performances and soccer tournaments, missing the charge nurse applications because my attendance record showed too many emergency family departures, sitting in staff meetings exhausted while colleagues discussed research projects and I mentally calculated whether I had remembered to sign Liam's reading log. Dana's boyfriend at the time, a man named Travis, whose primary contribution to the household was commentary on how things should be run, would leave with a casual "thanks for holding everything together" whenever he and Dana went somewhere together in the evenings. And that phrase, "holding everything together," became the thing I heard most often from people who needed me to keep doing exactly that and needed me to feel thanked for it rather than compensated or relieved. I started tracking what I was spending. School supplies, $43. Dance shoes for Brooklyn, $28. Inhaler copays, $30 monthly. Groceries, $90 a week. My own nursing shoes had worn through at the heel, but the replacement pair cost $115 I could not justify while Jade needed a winter coat and Cooper needed new cleats for spring season. One night, Jade appeared in the hallway after I thought everyone was asleep and found me at the kitchen table staring at BSN program admission requirements on my laptop, and she said, "Aunt Rach, why do you always look so tired?" And I told her I was just keeping up, and she hugged me with the full body commitment that 7-year-olds bring to hugs. And for a moment, I felt genuinely needed, and then the moment passed, and I sat with the question of what I was actually building in this kitchen at 11 at night, and whether any of it belonged to me. The announcement came on a Thursday evening in February when I was walking through the hospital parking garage after a shift that had started before dawn, and Dana called on FaceTime with the expression she wore when she had already decided something and was delivering it rather than discussing it. "Rach, I am pregnant again," she said. "5th baby, due in September, and here is the thing. We need you to cut back to part-time at the hospital when the baby comes. Travis and I will both be doing extra hours, and we cannot manage the older kids plus a newborn without you being more available." I stared at my own face in the phone screen, my hospital badge still around my neck, my scrubs carrying the particular smell of a 12-hour pediatric shift, and I said, "Dana, do you ever consider that I might have a life that belongs to me?" The call ended. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could drive. Over the following week, I discovered they had been planning this in notebooks. Dana and Travis had drawn up schedules, budgets, timelines, a complete restructuring of the next 3 years of my life, organized around my reduction to part-time nursing and full-time childcare. And they had researched market rates for professional childcare to explain why the $400 monthly they wanted me to pay in rent was actually a bargain given the services I would be receiving in exchange for the services I would be providing. And the document had sections with headers and subheaders and a clause about my financial obligation if I chose to leave the arrangement before the baby turned 2. Travis called it a contract. He said his friend knew a paralegal. He said it was just paperwork, that I would get housing and they would get guaranteed childcare, and that if I did not want to sign, they would need to make other arrangements because the lease was in their names. I sat across the kitchen table with them with that document in front of me and looked at it for a long time. The kitchen light buzzed the way it had always buzzed. The neighbor's dog was doing what the neighbor's dog did in the evenings. Cooper was upstairs. I could hear him moving around. "I am not signing this. I am moving out at the end of the month." Dana said I was abandoning the children. Travis said I had 3 days to reconsider before they needed me out. They believed I was bluffing because I had never once in 10 years followed through on leaving, and they had built their entire operational structure on that fact. They were wrong about me for the first time. I called an attorney named Karen Walsh that my friend Priya had recommended, and Karen reviewed Dana's draft contract in her office on a Tuesday morning and told me that what they were proposing violated multiple labor laws, that live-in childcare had specific wage requirements they were not meeting, and that I had zero legal obligation to sign anything they put in front of me. And the specific relief of hearing that said out loud by someone with credentials was so complete that I sat in the chair across from her desk and cried briefly and professionally. I signed a lease on a studio apartment 4 blocks from Cincinnati Children's Hospital. The first night there, surrounded by boxes and nursing textbooks and the particular silence of a space that contained no one else's needs, I felt lighter than I had felt in a decade, and the lightness was strange enough that I didn't entirely trust it yet. Dana was not finished. She called my hospital and told me I had been taking medications from the pediatric supply. My nursing director called me in the next morning and told me there would be an administrative investigation and I would be on unpaid leave during its resolution, and I had just signed a lease I could barely afford on my full salary. Karen documented everything: the false accusation to my employer, the blocked contact that prevented me from speaking to the children, the text messages that arrived daily, cycling between threats and pleas, the call to my landlord, the message to my nursing school claiming I had falsified a reference. Each incident required time and money to address, and each one also proved, more clearly than any argument I could have made, that a person engaged in vindictive harassment of a former childcare provider is not a person who has time to be a stable parent to 5 children, and the investigation at the hospital concluded with that understanding firmly established. 3 months after I moved out, I was reinstated with back pay and a formal apology from hospital administration, and Nurse Director Patterson approached me about the charge nurse position, and Dr. Okafor told me in the hallway that my dedication to patient care during one of the most difficult personal periods anyone on the floor had witnessed was exactly the quality that hospital leadership needed in a management role. I established Thursday evenings at my apartment with the kids. Planned activities, dinner I actually cooked with intention, space that was mine but open to them on specific terms that I controlled. And the first time they came, Leah ran straight to me and pressed her face against my side and said, "Aunt Rach, your apartment smells like brownies instead of diapers," which was both accurate and the best review I had ever received. Without me as the permanent foundation, the household on Claremont Avenue had to restructure itself around reality. Travis left 2 months after I did, which answered the question of how committed he had been to the family project versus how committed he had been to having free childcare. Dana had to learn the things she had spent a decade outsourcing to me: homework help and lunch packing and doctor appointment scheduling, and the particular patience required to get 4 children through a Tuesday morning without a backup person absorbing all the friction. Cooper called me during this period and said, in the careful voice of a 12-year-old who has observed more than adults realized he was observing, "Mom actually has to pay attention to us now. She made spaghetti that wasn't Burns last week. She came to Jade's recital." I said, "That sounds like it feels different," and he said, "It feels weird, but good, like she actually wants to be our mom instead of just having us around." Baby Noah was born in September. I went to the hospital and held him for 20 minutes and brought flowers and told Dana he was beautiful and that she was going to figure it out now because she had to now. And she looked at me from the hospital bed with the particular exhaustion of a woman who has just understood something she should have understood years earlier and said, "Rachel, I genuinely do not know how you did this for 10 years, with 4 kids. One baby is overwhelming me completely." It was as close to acknowledgement as I had ever received from her, and I accepted it for what it was, which was a beginning, and not a resolution. 14 months after I moved out, I stood in the back of the school auditorium and watched Cooper receive an Academic Achievement Award, and Dana was in the front row cheering with Noah in her lap and the twins beside her. And she had been at every school event since October, something she had never managed in the years when I was handling the logistics of their lives for her. After the ceremony, Cooper found me in the hallway with his academic achievement certificate rolled in his hands and said, "Thanks, Aunt Rach." And I asked for what? And he said, "For showing us what it looks like when someone has boundaries, for making Mom actually step up. She is proud of herself now, we can tell." Dana walked slowly with Noah on her shoulder and said, "Thank you," quietly, barely audible over the auditorium crowd, "for not letting me keep using you as a crutch. The kids are proud of me, and I had forgotten what that felt like." I told her she had always been capable of it, and she had just needed to believe she was required to be, and that was true, and it was also the truest summary of everything the last decade had taught me. My apartment is small and entirely mine. On my desk is my BSN program acceptance letter for the fall semester. Beside it is the card from Dr. Okafor congratulating me on the charge nurse promotion. The coffee mug the kids gave me for my birthday says, "World's Best Aunt" in letters Brooklyn chose because she liked the font, and it holds the pens I use for my own goals now, which are numerous and specific and entirely mine to pursue. The most honest thing I know from everything that happened is this: saying no to someone you love is not the opposite of love. It is sometimes the most complete expression of it, because when you refuse to absorb the consequences of another person's choices indefinitely, you give them the only thing that actually produces growth, which is the experience of their own life belonging to them and requiring their full attention. I was not their mother. I was their aunt who loved them enough to let their actual mother discover what she was capable of, which turned out to be considerably more than either of us had previously understood. The day I said no to Dana was the day I said yes to myself, and it took 10 years to arrive at it, but I am here now,
And the coffee is hot because I made it for myself at a time of my choosing, and nobody needed anything from me before I finished it. That is not a small thing. That is everything.